Have you ever wondered what would happen if a janitor suddenly walked into a $1 million board meeting? At Sinclair Dynamics, one of the most powerful conglomerates in New York, that unthinkable scenario became reality. In the cold, sterile boardroom, where expensive suits and razor-sharp gazes were the unspoken norm, everyone was anxiously awaiting the report that would determine the company's fate. Cold white lights poured over leather chairs, creating a tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. The room was silent, until the door swung open. Veronica Sinclair, the renowned chairwoman known for her cold demeanor and sharp wit, entered with a powerful stride. But what left the room stunned was not her presence, it was the person beside her, Lucas Meyer. A janitor in a dust-speckled blue uniform, still clutching an old, worn rag, annoyed glances, suppressed whispers. A high-level strategic meeting, and Veronica had brought a janitor along? No one could comprehend what was happening. A quiet, buzzing tension spread through the room, like a great storm gathering strength. Veronica offered no explanation. She simply sat down, her icy gaze sweeping across the roomful of astonished faces. "Before you start asking questions," she said in a calm, steady voice, "let me tell you a story. A story that no one in that room was ready to hear." That day, Veronica Sinclair had no intention of uncovering anything unusual. She was merely passing through the 6th floor, the break area for lower-level employees, to inspect a minor maintenance issue. Had she not slowed her steps at the sound of a voice coming from a small room, Lucas Meyer's life might have continued slipping by in silence. "You shouldn't touch that stock right now." Lucas's voice rang out, clear and certain. "Short-term profits might be tempting, but if you look at the long-term market trends, it's a trap. The real value lies in undervalued assets." Veronica froze in the hallway, her eyes narrowing. That wasn't the usual idle chatter of blue-collar workers. It was real financial analysis, expressed in plain, practical language, surprisingly sharp and precise without any trace of empty jargon. Driven by curiosity, she moved closer, peeking through the crack of the slightly open door. In a modest room furnished with an old dining table, Lucas sat, gripping a broken pencil, sketching graphs onto a scrap of paper, explaining to a colleague the post-2008 crisis fluctuations and how shrewd investors found opportunities amid the wreckage. Veronica stood silently in the shadows, listening for more than 15 minutes. Every word Lucas spoke came not from textbook theory, but from hard-earned experience, lessons no classroom could teach. A silent question began to form in her mind. Why was someone with such a sharp mind holding a rag instead of a portfolio? As the conversation drew to a close, Veronica didn't hesitate. She pushed the door open, leaving the two men frozen like schoolboys caught sneaking out of class. "Lucas Meyer," she called him by name, her voice calm but commanding. "I need to ask you something." There was a flicker of hesitation, even fear, in Lucas's eyes, but Veronica had already seen what she needed to see, the raw, unpolished potential buried under a life of hardship. In that moment, Veronica Sinclair made a decision no one else at the conglomerate could have anticipated, a decision that would change Lucas's life forever. When Veronica announced that she had invited Lucas to attend that morning's strategic meeting, the entire leadership team at Sinclair Dynamics thought they had misheard her. A janitor at the table for a critical financial meeting? The room fell into a wave of uncomfortable murmurs, heavy glances tinged with disdain. Lucas followed behind Veronica, his head bowed low, still clutching the rag he had forgotten to leave behind in the break room. His faded blue uniform stood out like an indelible stain among a sea of $1,000 suits. The scrutinizing stares cut into him like invisible knives. No one even bothered to hide their skepticism, or their contempt. Lawrence Becker, the chief financial officer, gave a small cough to break the silence, forcing a polite smile. "Mrs. Sinclair, I believe there must be some mistake?" Veronica didn't even look at him. She simply sat down, laced her fingers together, and offered a faint, cold smile. "No mistake. Lucas is here at my invitation." The atmosphere thickened even more. Martin Caldwell, the executive vice president, smirked, his eyes gleaming with mockery. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if settling in to enjoy a spectacle. Lucas could feel the waves of cold judgment crashing down on him. His heart pounded against his chest. Every step, Every breath weighed heavy, as if he were dragging a mountain behind him. He knew he didn't belong here, at least. Not in the eyes of the powerful men seated around the table. Veronica, on the other hand, seemed to relish the silent chaos she had unleashed. She slowly opened the document in front of her, then looked around the room, her sharp gaze slicing through the confusion. "Before you rush to judgment," she said in a voice as cold as steel, "remember this. Sometimes the greatest opportunities don't come from those with the prettiest resumes, but from those you've never even bothered to notice." Lucas lifted his head. In that moment, amid the sea of disdainful stares, he began to feel what Veronica had seen all along. A person's true worth wasn't measured by the suit they wore, but by the mind they carried. The meeting, which seemed on the verge of turning into a farce. None of them, not even Veronica, could foresee the earthquake that was about to unfold. The entire room held its breath as Veronica gently slid the stack of documents toward Lucas. "Lucas," she said, her voice calm but full of hidden meaning. "Show them what you've seen." Lucas straightened his back, placing his hands on the table to hide the slight tremble. All eyes drilled into him, skeptical, mocking, waiting for him to stumble. He could feel every discreet sigh, every disappointed shake of the head. But then, he began. "The issue isn't with the underperforming assets," Lucas said, his voice cautious at first, but quickly gaining strength. "It's with how you're evaluating them." A murmur flickered across the table like a jolt of electricity. Martin Caldwell arched an eyebrow and smirked. Lawrence Becker crossed his arms, his gaze sharp and cold. Lucas didn't falter. He pulled out a spreadsheet he had pored over during countless lonely hours in the janitor's closet. "Outsourced transportation costs have risen 12% over the past 2 quarters," he said, his voice steadying even more. "Meanwhile, your in-house fleet is operating at less than 50% capacity." A slight shift stirred at the end of the table. Alyssa Chen, the young financial analyst, quietly swiped her fingers across her tablet screen. Her expression changed. Lucas pressed on, like a sharp blade cutting straight into the gaps the leadership had long tried to patch over. "Your current models are still based on pre-pandemic fuel prices. The market has shifted. You're paying premium outsourcing fees for services your in-house fleet could handle at a fraction of the cost." Silence blanketed the room like a freezing wave. Martin stopped smiling. Lawrence exhaled sharply, flipping through old reports. Some executives started to mutter in protest, only to quickly fall silent as they realized the numbers Lucas cited matched the facts with unsettling precision. Veronica leaned back in her chair, her eyes glinting dangerously. She had gambled on Lucas, and he had just proven her right. For the first time that morning, no one in the room saw Lucas as a janitor anymore. They saw him for what he truly was, a real threat, and an asset they never knew they had. The game had changed. As Lucas finished speaking, the air in the room seemed to freeze solid. Veronica didn't hesitate for a second. She turned to Lucas, her voice striking the room like a gavel pounding against a courtroom bench. "Lucas Meyer," she declared, "I am offering you the position of financial advisor to Sinclair Dynamics. Effective immediately." The words exploded in the room like a thunderclap. Martin Caldwell shot up from his chair, the leather seat screeching sharply across the floor. His face flushed red with outrage. "Veronica, you can't be serious," Martin nearly shouted, all pretense of civility gone. "A janitor, as a financial advisor? Is this some kind of joke?" Veronica didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head slightly, her icy gaze locking onto Martin like a blade. "I'm dead serious. And this isn't a joke. Martin, I'm saving this company." Lawrence Becker, his face tense, tried to intervene with a more measured tone. "With all due respect, Mrs. Sinclair, this kind of appointment doesn't follow protocol. No formal evaluation, no vetting process. Protocol," Veronica cut him off, her voice sharp as a knife, "has led you to 3 consecutive quarters of losses. Seems to me it's time for a new protocol." Martin gave a humorless chuckle, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're risking the reputation of Sinclair Dynamics on a whim." Veronica rose to her feet. The silence in the room felt crushed by the sheer weight of her presence. She walked forward, stopping just a few steps away from Martin. "I own this company, Martin," she said, each word hitting like a nail hammered into stone. "If I choose to bet on Lucas, it's not a whim, it's strategy. All eyes were fixed on them. Lucas sat frozen, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had never seen anyone stand up for him like this, especially against someone as powerful and cold as Martin Caldwell. Martin narrowed his eyes, swallowing his fury, but he understood. In this power game, Veronica held all the pieces. Veronica turned back to Lucas, her voice softening by a beat. You don't need a degree to prove your worth. You just did what no one on this leadership team has managed in over a year. Lucas drew a deep breath. The doubts, the shame, the fear that had shackled him for so many years, he felt them start to crack apart. In that room, under the weight of 1,000 scrutinizing stares, he heard his own voice, steadier than it had ever been. I accept. The room erupted into a stunned chorus of whispers. The next morning, when Lucas Meyer stepped out of the elevator onto the executive floor of Sinclair Dynamics, he immediately felt the weight of cold, piercing stares raining down on him like 1,000 needles. The new suit he wore, neat but modest, couldn't mask the prejudice in the air. To many here, he was still just the janitor who had stumbled his way onto the grand chessboard. Skepticism, even disdain, glittered in every sideways glance. Alyssa Chen, the young financial analyst, met him in the hallway. Her face betrayed little emotion as she quietly handed him a thick folder. Hope you're ready, she said, her voice carrying a faint edge of challenge. They won't give you time to adjust. Lucas nodded, gripping the file tightly. I don't need them to go easy on me, he replied, his gaze unwavering. Inside the conference room, the familiar faces were already gathered: Martin Caldwell, Lawrence Becker, and several other senior executives. Some gave curt nods, others didn't bother hiding their contempt. Lawrence opened the meeting with a quick glance at Lucas. We want your cost-cutting plan for logistics, right now. No time for a crash course. Lucas took a deep breath. In front of him sat men who were used to commanding others, but he was no longer the janitor who bowed his head. Calmly, Lucas laid out the reports, transportation charts, and cost analyses. His voice steady, he walked them through every calculation, every proposal for restructuring the in-house fleet, solutions that even the seasoned analysis teams had overlooked. At first, there were whispers, brief flashes of doubtful glances. But the longer he spoke, the quieter the room grew. Martin crossed his arms, narrowing his eyes. Alyssa silently flipped through the documents, her lips pressed into a thin line. Lucas knew he couldn't win them all over in a day. But he also knew something even more important. He didn't need immediate acceptance. He just needed to deliver results. And this morning, every number, every line of analysis he presented, was something no one in that room could ignore. In the end, just as Veronica Sinclair had said, success doesn't require permission. It only requires someone brave enough to step forward, even when the whole world turns its back. Lucas Meyer didn't walk into Sinclair Dynamics with a prestigious degree or a glittering resume. He walked in with something no one here ever expected to respect: grit, perseverance, and a mind sharpened quietly through years of being overlooked by the world. That day, when Lucas left the boardroom, he was no longer the janitor buried under cold stares. He was a financial advisor, not just in title, but by the undeniable strength of his proven ability. Veronica Sinclair watched his figure as he left, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. She knew the challenges ahead would be relentless. Lucas would still have to face doubt. Invisible barriers built by old prejudices and outdated power. But she also knew he was ready. Because in this world, sometimes talent doesn't come wrapped in an expensive suit. Sometimes, all it takes is an opportunity. Someone willing to notice. And one moment of courage to step forward when every eye turns away. The story of Lucas Meyer stands as a powerful reminder for all of us. You don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. You only need to believe that your worth isn't defined by where you start, but by how steadfastly you move forward. Even when no one else believes in you. That day, Lucas didn't just change his own life. He rewrote the very meaning of opportunity, for everyone who's ever been underestimated.